Hello, I'm Cheryl Brutvan, Director of Curatorial Affairs and the Bailey Curator of Contemporary Art at the Norton Museum. And I'm thrilled to be able to look at the Maria Berrío exhibition at the Norton with Maria Berrío. We're going to walk through the exhibit and hear from Maria as we discuss some of the important points in her career while we're looking at her art. So hello, Maria, welcome.
Hi, Cheryl. It's such an honor to be here and to be here with you. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation.
We're thrilled. And we thought we'd start with a very recent work. This is one of the paintings that was finished just in time for this exhibition. And I wanted to use this as a way to talk about your background a little bit. You've been living in Brooklyn, but you're native to Colombia, and you told me this was partly a memory of the flower markets in Bogota.
Yeah. I have been living in Brooklyn for the past 20 years, but I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and I came here when I was 18, and I've been living since then. And yeah, this painting is one of the most recent pieces that I created for the exhibition, and it was inspired in the flower markets that I used to visit when I was a kid. But at the same time, it talks a little bit about this moment in history and this idea of this simple moments we are kind of not able to share because of the pandemic. So the title is Between the Orchids and the Weed, and it refers to orchids being like this beautiful flower and the weed having a more functional purpose, and how like these kind of moments lie in between that, in between those moments of beauty and those moments of functionality.
But it's so interesting you didn't include either orchids or wheat in the composition.
Yeah, I think the title was a bit like it was a bit more poetic, like referring to this to the meaning of the piece.
Yeah.
But also, like as you can see, there's like a cell phone in a sense of like how a lot of these moments are usually interrupted by technology, and how right now we're longing for these moments, but there is always. We're taking for granted these moments that before used to be so.
Yeah. Could you tell me more, because I know your background, you went to Parsons and SVA in New York, but tell me about that process of realizing you're an artist. You're in Miami, and it was your family came together from Colombia really to escape some of the real trials and extortion of business and I think widely known in the news. So your family was fortunate and you stayed in Miami together for like 5 or 6 years, is that right?
Yeah, we came like at the beginning, I came to New York to go to school, and then my parents were living in Miami.
And they were going back to Colombia because it was safer, or they felt...
Yeah, they continue. But they actually moved to Miami because of the situation there.
Yeah.
So I did my first year of school in New York, and then I came back to move to Miami to live with them. And I lived with them for a little bit, and then they decided to move back, and I stayed by myself.
And so you told them you're not going with them?
Yeah. Yes, I basically, my dad actually came and said like, oh, you have to come back, and I said I'm gonna stay.
That was really brave of you.
Yeah.
And knowing that you wanted to be an artist too.
Yeah, I really wanted to continue, and I wanted to go back to New York. I wanted to go back, and I wanted to continue going to school, and that's so I stayed here in Miami and I worked for a bit, and then I returned back to New York and I went to Parsons, and then immediately I was too scared of going into the real world, and I went straight to my graduate studies, and right after I continued making work.
Yeah.
But it was this feeling also of New York being this place that I wanted to be and that I was obsessed with. So it was this idea of doing everything to stay there, which is which I did.
Yeah.
So
it's like this realization you're an artist, and
yes.
you this is what you needed to do to really fulfill not your dream, but something you had to do.
Yeah, like I knew I wanted to be an artist, and I knew like I never took for granted my education, and I knew like I would have to go through it, and I would have to, it was the place that inspired me the most to be creative. It was the place where I wanted to be and where I wanted to evolve as an artist. And I think like now it's been 20 years after, and I can see the evolution as I see this exhibition. I see the moments I was going through, and I see also how the technique changed and how my life changed.
Yeah, we should look at that, because you, instead of painting, I know you said you were always interested in drawing, and drawing is everywhere evident in this exhibit and your work, but the use of paper collage is unusual, but also almost something you can't even tell until you see your work in person. So let's look at this earliest piece in the exhibit. Yeah. And also the title of this work is so poetic as well. But to talk about this, and you should say the title in Spanish.
The title of this work is El cielo tiene jardines, and it comes, I first heard this sentence in a song of Chavela Vargas, and then
I listen. You can listen to that. I listened to it. It's haunting. I mean, it's like heartbreaking.
It is very heartbreaking. It is. Her music is very. It's very beautiful,
it's emotional,
and it has a lot of emotion. Yeah. So I first heard that in her song, but then as we were talking, it made reference to also, like she made reference to a poem from Garcia Lorca. So she was referencing a poem in her song, and then I used the title for my painting. Mm-hmm. And this particular painting I made when I was pregnant, and I was thinking, like I used to have a lot of dreams during my pregnancy.
You mean unusual or just
very unusual dreams?
Because it's fantastic, but we also associate that with your early work, this magical realism.
Exactly.
I mean, which contrasts to the most recent work we looked at, because that seems like a very believable scene.
Yeah.
But this, it's a bit, you can understand parrots in a tree, and there's this beautiful lush landscape, but then you have this reclining figure and a tiger on top of her. Yeah. So how did you arrive at this?
I think there was a lot of, I was dreaming a lot, but at the same time I always try to, I always try to, whatever I'm going through, it comes out in the work. Mm-hmm. So in this sense, I when I was pregnant, I felt this being taking over me. Yeah. And I don't know how that referenced the tiger on top of her, and also this uncertain world around me. Mm-hmm. So I think it does talk a bit about magical realism, which a lot of the paintings are informed by it, which is this sense of fantasy, but also this sense of fantasy injected to my own reality.
Right.
So I think this was one of the first pieces also that I made with collage. Mm-hmm. As you were saying, I am fascinated with drawing. I used to make these really large-scale charcoal drawings. I used to draw all the time, and then painting was always very, very hard for me. And then when I discovered collage, I just found this incredible freedom and this world of possibility. And this was one of my first pieces, which was very ambitious in the sense that because of the size, but where I discovered how am I gonna create a painting just with Japanese paper. So this one was one of the first ones.
And is it all Japanese paper? Because I know you've used different types of paper, and we'll see that in the exhibit. Yeah. This one, what strikes me is how dense the composition is. It's like there's not an inch that isn't covered outside of the arms and the body of your figure.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a self-portrait?
I think so. I think it is a self-portrait. I think a lot of them are somehow self-portraits.
Yeah.
I think that what is going on with all the work is that slowly I'm kind of understanding the technique more, so it's getting a little bit, not really like more simple, but it's getting more refined.
Yeah.
But I think in a sense, when I made this, there was like a more cathartic, more like expressive. So I tried not to lose that in the other works. I tried that there's always that there's always chaos, and then there's some sort of order in these chaotic worlds.
But you can see, I mean, you still can read this as there's a figure in the foreground, and then there's this tree and a dark sky, but it's just so dense with patterning, which it's controlled, but it's on the verge of, as you say, chaos. And it seems like more controlled, and let's look at these, I think, landscapes really that come about in this next group of works. And you told me this is one of your favorite pieces.
Yeah, like when I arrived yesterday to see the exhibition, I was very taken by this piece. I think maybe because I haven't seen it in a while. But this piece was exactly, it started like, I created this series of dioramas inspired in the Museum of Natural History.
You were actually making dioramas or drawing them?
Drawing the dioramas.
Okay.
So when I learned how to draw by observation, so I would go to the Museum of Natural History, or I would go to the Metropolitan Museum and I would draw the statues, or in the museum I would just draw the dioramas. So then I decided to create my own dioramas inspired on the dioramas at the museum, and this was one of the first ones I created. In a sense, with the technique, I was exploring like how to create the landscapes with paper. So this is kind of one of the first landscapes that I made in a more realistic way, like from the other ones I was making at the beginning.
But this is still, it's deceiving because you look at it and it's very believable landscape and the woods, and I'm not sure where it is, but you can understand that it's based in the real, whatever the real world is anymore. But then you look at the figures, and there's it looks like a child on the back of an older person, whether it's still a child, and someone on the right. And you see these feathers, these wings on them. So what at first seems like this, oh, you've jumped into reality, it's actually still the subversive version of a, not so much surrealist, but this kind of fantastic world.
Yeah, I think this series, like when I created this painting, it inspired another series of paintings, which were the Nightingales. And the Nightingales are these women who are, who instead of an arm have a wing. And it talks about a bit about this idea of having something that makes you free, but at the same time that keeps you, that makes you different in a sense, that makes you more special, but at the same time is kind of taking away your freedom, because you are not, because you have something that is not normal.
Right.
And in a sense, so these nightingales were these very strong women who had these wings as like their armor, but at the same time, they were not completely free.
Right.
So this series, so I think this painting, I started to explore this idea of the nightingales, this idea of flight, and this idea of freedom. So this one of them.
They're so bound. I mean, of course, the other thing that when you see a wing on a person, you also think of this sort of angelic character, and a sense of freedom as well as being part of the earth, but also being able to be free and go where you want. Exactly. And that comes into play, I know, in a few later pieces. But the idea of earth and the landscape seems very strong in Aluna. I didn't know what or who Aluna was, and you
Yes.
And you used it very specifically, although the landscape is much more sparse and believable here as well, with the red mountains and the sea. And you've used the paper so differently too in this piece. But tell me, what is Aluna and the references in this composition, which is at first very sort of quiet, and people are in water, and then you realize this is a tiger in the foreground. You don't know floating or what else has happened, and then you see these. It looks like bloodied hands in the character on the left.
Yeah, there is definitely like a lot of my work also deals with environmentalism and our relationship to the environment, and also like how disconnected we are with the environment because of technology. Mm-hmm. So in this piece, Aluna, I actually read about, there's a tribe in Colombia in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, and they're called the Kogis, and they believe that Aluna is a life force, it's like Mother Earth. And when one of the sons of a priest or of a shaman is born, they would put him in a cave for the first 9 years of his life until he, so in a sense, they want him to connect with his own self,
right,
before he gets to see the outside world, before he sees Mother Earth, before he sees Aluna, what they call Aluna. So when I read that story, I was fascinated by the beauty of it. I was fascinated by I'm fascinated by ancient beliefs and ways of seeing the world that come from.
And was it something you were aware of when you were younger, or is it something you came across later?
I came across later. I think like a lot of the research I do on my work comes out of these kind of stories, but I came across this one later, mm-hmm, about Aluna. And when I wanted to make this painting, I started to kind of connect it to our world right now. Right. And I imagined that when this kid came out of the cave, everything would be flooded, and like it's kind of so then you can see that everything is flooded, like everything is, and it talks about like our own relationship with our environment, mm-hmm, where like we're more concerned about technology, less concerned about how we treat our animals or treat our treat nature around us. Yeah.
But tell me, do the bloodied hands have a meaning, and the tiger have a specific meaning when you put this together? And then the butterfly in the background, and that symbolism of nature.
Yeah, the tiger, like I want the viewer to make its own like interpretation of what the tiger, if he's alive or he's dead. But I did see it as he's dead. Like I did, like my own interpretation of the painting was that he was also...
He'd also suffered from the way nature has evolved. But I find also interesting at this point, even in the cricket song and Knitting the Wind, you now have and they're women mostly, mm-hmm, but they're also, the gaze is out at the viewer. Yeah. And that's a very, that's a very specific gesture on your part, to give these women that kind of strength, that they are almost fearless, and the turn of not looking down or looking away, although some may but that you are always having at least one or a few looking directly out to the viewer.
Yeah.
And that's very intentional on your part.
Completely. Like I want to portray, like, when you look at them, to feel like this courage or this strength. I want the woman to, I want my woman to be seen as a very courageous and like, even like there's some times where you feel like they are sad or they are in their own worlds, or like I want you to feel like they have control in their environments, mm-hmm, and in these worlds they are like in control of them.
And that kind of sense of you can do what you need to do and what you have to do in order to survive.
Yeah.
so it comes out. And when you made the composition, to me, is so much more sparse. Is that a conscious change at this point in your work? That, I mean, it works well with this because you're focused on this group with the tiger, but the landscape too is just, you've sort of like opened up and taken a deep breath, it seems, in the composition.
Yeah, I think at this, when I was creating this piece and the one we're gonna see after, I was like handling the paper in a different way. I was using like larger sheets of paper. I was less, like in the first pieces there was this idea of like tearing different little pieces of paper and creating a landscape. And then here I realized like, oh, I can make huge paintings and I can use like large sheets of paper. Like I don't need to be constrained by the idea of collage is like small little segments of things that you put together. This doesn't have to be small little segments. This can be like a huge brush.
Expansive.
Yeah. It can be expansive.
And that's true in the next, the next two pieces we're going to look at that speak of these, they're ambitious because of the scale, but also the way you've used paper in them too. Let's look at those. I think this, again, is one of these artworks that people, when they see it as a reproduction, they think it's probably a painting, and then you realize that it's been collaged. And anemocori, I know that title came later. It's, you know, it's like a dandelion. It's the seed that is planted by being taken away in the wind. But what's important here is again, this fantastic, unbelievable juxtaposition of the figures in this beautiful desert you've created. How did this come about? And the bigger subject of immigration. This piece, like as I was telling you before, when I arrived to the creation of this piece, I was using like larger sheets of paper. So that kind of gave me the freedom to create like a larger sense of like an expansive landscape. At the same time, I started to like some of the symbols of the piece, like the trees, that it would be repeated in a lot of the works. This is the dragon blood tree, which I didn't know what that was. Why did you use that?
So this series of these paintings started to talk a little bit about immigration, and the dragon blood tree is a tree found of an island in Yemen, and I became fascinated with the idea of how this tree looks and how the roots seems like they are going into the sky. So in a sense, if we refer to like myself being an immigrant, you feel a bit like rootless, like when you go somewhere else. So in this series and in some of the other series, you can see the symbolism of the dragon blood tree. At the same time, as you were saying, the piece also talks about anemocori, and about this idea of anemocori being the scientific term of the seeds of plants being carried by the wind, and this idea of a lot of the destiny of immigrants as myself is out of our control. It's like being carried,
when I think of this too, when you look at the figures, you know, there's this comfortable bed and someone sitting in a chair holding, again, a butterfly, that symbolism, but in the midst of a desert, which seems so impossible to survive in. And if you take that quite literally, I mean, you can only go to the news and hear stories of what's happening in especially the Southwest United States. But your immigrant story isn't that, but it's that sense of rootlessness. And I remember you saying at one point, like you're no longer, like you're Colombian, but the memory of Colombia and the presence of Brooklyn are you're sort of neither here nor there.
Exactly. Like I feel a bit like that, and I felt like that for a while, where like I was not from here or was not from there, where like I never saw, like I knew I loved New York, but I never like I kept moving from one home to the other, and I never saw it as home, and I never wanted to make it home. Yeah. And then it became my home. Yeah. But at the same time, I think that that being from somewhere else always, like for me, Colombia is always like this dream-like memory that I feel like if I was there, it would come out in the work in such a different way. Right. I think it comes out in a very dream-like and in a very blurred memory. So I think.
So are you listening to the news in your studio? I mean, you're very aware of what's happening in the country, of course, but is that something, what's on in your studio as you're listening to these, you know, in terms of immigration, this is so profound right now.
Yeah, I think like a lot of, let's say when we're going to talk about Oda.
Yeah, let's look at that.
So
this is also by scale, so ambitious, but full of these figures and this, again, the subject of immigration.
Yeah, like this piece I created like when there was the first time I heard about the Trump administration of family separation policy.
Yeah, which is.
And I remember going to the studio and being like very upset and very heartbroken and feeling like this sense of helplessness. And then as a mother too, I felt like torn by like knowing that there were women that were being separated from their children. So I just started to create this drawing. It started as a drawing, and then I started to imagine these women as they could either be either be the children who are holding into their freedom, symbolized by the birds, and the fragility of their freedom, or they could also be the mothers who are holding into this precious thing that is gonna be taken away from them. So I created this piece in the light of that terrible thing that's been going on. So yeah, to me it was a very emotional piece. To me it was a very important piece in a sense, and it also has that element of like magical realism of something real that is like it has its own fantasy and its own symbolism.
But it almost seems, you know, again you're pushing towards this world realism, although you have each of the figures, to me they look younger, like younger girls almost, but they almost have like a traditional costume, or they all have a similar type of dress. What is that dress? Is that something specific?
I wanted them to look like they had a uniform, like they were like they were like not, they were all treated the same because of who they were. So I wanted them all to be, you know, like have their own, like to bring them together with their clothing in a sense. So they all look, they also look very pensive, and they're like staring at you, and they're kind of like...
Yeah, they're all looking out.
Yeah.
Do you think of that as defiance in this composition?
Yeah, I think that there's something about them when I wanted them to show strength, but I also wanted them to bring awareness. I wanted them to be looking at you and in a sense portraying like this is wrong, like this is not...
But it's also like survivors.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, both the Anemakori and this composition show that sense of being able to endure what else is happening. Yeah. But what I love is that you don't make that overt in the work. You know, someone else could come and look at this and not necessarily think it's about your reaction to an experience as an immigrant.
Yeah.
The other thing also in this composition is you have them in an interior room that's very believable. So you're really wrestling with that idea of the foreground and recession into space, and then this the walls, the expansiveness now isn't nature, but this interior room, and yet it's all very believable. It all makes sense, and that must be hard to do with paper. How do you actually determine? Is that you need a darker piece of paper or something else? I have to move this piece over to there. I ripped this part off of the canvas. I noticed there was a spot on the right side where there used to be a chair leg and it's gone.
And it can move.
Yeah, it's just like you want to point that.
Yeah, like here there used to be a chair and then I moved it.
Yeah. So it's very much like painting in that sense too.
It is very much like painting. There's a lot of layering in the work, and there's a lot of these works are about process. Like I have a plan and it starts with a drawing, but a lot of it changes. So it could, everything can change in a second, and I let myself make the changes. I let the process dictate the painting. I don't fight back when it's very obvious that everything has to change. But let's say in this piece, there was this sense of nature crawling into this interior space, which you can see in a lot of my pieces, that nature comes in the windows. And I think that happens in a sense to show the imperfection, the imperfection of their environment, and how these things are crawling inside the interiors. But the process is every painting can have over hundreds of layers of paper, some less, and I'm not so careful. Sometimes you can see a phone number under the canvas, or drawing under the paper, and it's very, very much there's all this mark making that you can find in painting, but here you can find it in collage. So
you're still drawing in a way.
Oh yeah, all of it I see it as drawing. I see a lot of it when I cut. I see it I'm cutting a line with an X-Acto knife. When I tear, I see the gesture of a line. Yeah. So I think that my practice is definitely it's definitely inspired in drawing. And then when I get to the faces, when I get to the hands, to their gaze and to their expression is my favorite place, because I get to draw again.
And that's where it actually is drawing in watercolor, isn't it? Often in the faces, the expression, or especially. And are your characters from any particular place when you draw them?
Know.
Or in this composition?
Yeah, they're a lot of the characters come to being also in collage. Sometimes I would draw myself. As you can see, there's a lot of them that look like me. There's a lot of them that look like my mother. There's a lot of them that look like my son. But there's also this idea of sometimes I would draw a nose, and then I would draw somebody's eyes and somebody's mouth. So there is this sense of collage also in the way I'm drawing and in the way I find them. But I see them all very spiritual. I see them all until I find who they are, and then I understand what the painting is. But a lot of times, most recently, I've been drawing people I know, but a lot of my past work is just very ethereal.
So the collage.
Yeah, they're very collage, and I love that. I love that sense that it gives me a little more freedom to create whatever. It's in my head. So
let's look at nature, because even though you were making work during the pandemic, which was really hard to do, and in part because you had an exhibition coming up at Victoria Miro Gallery in London. So the sense of how you were going to approach this in your studio, I remember visiting you, and you were already deeply into making canvases, but right after that, the pandemic struck in March, and you didn't go to the studio.
Yeah, no, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was in New York, which got very, sadly,
hit so hard.
It got really, really hit really hard at the very beginning. So I was at the first steps of creating my solo exhibition for Victoria Miro, and I had to stop, and started creating smaller paintings.
Right, and that because you weren't at the studio, right?
I was creating them at home.
And is that an apartment you were working in?
I was working actually in my son's bedroom.
Oh my gosh.
So I changed his room into my studio, and I created smaller paintings, which in a sense was kind of like it was very exciting because I've been creating these huge paintings all of my life, and I was in a sense able to go deeper and like have these like more delicate and more personal relation to these portraits. So this piece was the first one I created, which is called the spike of the crocus.
Yeah, the spike of crocus. And I remember you describing this to me. It's quite unassuming, and then you realize what the meaning is from the fact that you couldn't be outside and seeing spring arrive.
Exactly, it was exactly that. Like we were all at home, and usually in New York City, once spring comes, everyone goes out and goes crazy, and it's like this like new like everyone feels like they're reborn, and they are gonna. There's this sense of excitement, and at that time, of course, it was not that particular case. So I wanted to make a portrait of a woman, and in her scarf, there's all this blossoming that she can't see. Yeah. So it's kind of like surrounding her, but she can't enjoy or she can't go out.
Right. And I love this because you have this other kind of abstraction through the red and white stripes of her garment, and then the background you also made stripes. I mean, it's very bold in terms of the composition, and having this real juxtaposition of nature and sharp edges in a way. And yet that figure also, you have this classic example of someone who really can see you no matter where you are. Is looking at you. It's slightly larger than life size, I think, rather than and you made other small works during this time period too. And maybe we should look at those next.
Yes.
Yeah. I love the self-portrait. It's so beautiful.
Yes, I was saying, like this, like I usually, when I start a series of works, I always do a self-portrait, and I try to put it at the entrance of the studio, in a sense, to remind myself of being present when I create the work. So this self-portrait had been in the studio from 2019 all the way through now.
I remember seeing it.
Yes, and it had like it had its evolution. So sometimes I just do the drawing and then I start collaging as I go.
This one is mostly drawing, isn't it? Do you have any collage on?
It has a bit of it
just
has
a
collage,
little, but mostly drawing.
Mostly drawing. Yeah, mostly drawing.
But also your son.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, when I created the spike of the crocus, I also created another series of smaller works. And since, of course, this time we've spent so much at home and with my son, I decided to paint him. And this is one of the first times I have made an actual painting of him. So it had a very sweet feeling to it, and like it also kind of. I want him to see it in the future and kind of remind him of this time, because it's a very historical time in a sense of going through this pandemic. And as you can see, he has like a gaze which is a bit, I don't know, like you can't really tell if he's happy or he's sad. It's like a weird, like kind of.
He looks curious.
Yeah, he's like curious.
Looking out. But how did you do this from life, sitting looking at him, or did you take photos, or do you use photos?
I actually took a photo of him, and then I worked from the photo for a little bit, and then he would sit for me just so I could get his eyes and so I could get his like essence in a way. So this was one of the smaller pieces I created for. During the pandemic.
But you really, I mean, the composition makes you really focus on his expression and his face, and it's so difficult to sustain that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
But I love also when you told me the story of this beautiful portrait of your mother, the premonition,
Yeah.
which is based on a photograph.
It is based on a photograph, and it is, I always send my mom roses on her birthday. So I haven't seen her in a while because of the pandemic, and I called it the premonition because it's this sense that she's giving me the flower, the roses I send her. And this, I wanted to create like a moment of interaction between each other because we haven't had it in so long. And also this actual portrait came from when she graduated as a doctor. So I thought it was also like such an important moment for her that I wanted to capture it in the painting.
So she's a remarkable role model too.
Yeah, she is. She actually is. She's a very strong woman, and through all our lives, she always worked really hard, and she always. She also had a very She also has a very giving thing. Like when she used to see her patients, she would stay hours with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that in a sense, I'm inspired by that, by the idea of creating, being able to give things.
That empathy
towards
others as well.
Yeah, and I think I think with this painting I wanted to capture also that empathy of her giving, mm-hmm. and she's
generosity.
So. Yeah, generosity.
And I'm thrilled that we also have the last work that you did. This body of work had a title, right?
Yeah,
Broken Currents and
Flower Songs and Broken Currents. So as you can see, here, this
beautiful, really wonderful piece that I'm thrilled the Norton Museum has acquired.
I'm so incredibly honored that it's going to be here and excited. And this piece comes from this series of works, as you said, Flower Songs and Broken Currents, which was my latest exhibition at Victoria Miro, my first exhibition at Victoria Miro, but my latest exhibition.
And again, it has that really quiet achievement instead of when you think of the frenetic, intense collage of the earliest work, and here you're able to create this piece that conveys calmness and also still has nature.
Yeah, it is titled The Quiet Undoing, and in this particular exhibition I was creating an imaginary village that had undergone a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. So it was a fictional village, and when I created this exhibition I found myself in kind of a catastrophe, which was the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And this was the last piece I made for the exhibition. And I saw it as this moment of calmness, but at the same time, there wasn't calmness.
Right.
So it was also the longing that I think a lot of us have had of just nothingness, of there's no news, there's no, this kind of quiet moment with ourselves that unfortunately hasn't happened in a while. Mm-hmm. So I think in a sense, the painting gave me that calmness, and I wanted to feel like there was a breeze. I wanted to feel like there was a smell. So I think when I think of this painting, I feel those things somehow. Mm-hmm. So it was the last piece, and it has a very calm feeling, I think.
And you achieved it in the palette, and I love the shadow you've created again with paper below the bougainvillea, which you also mentioned is a favorite flower of yours.
Yes,
the bush.
I wanted the bougainvillea to feel like it was moving, and also I wanted to challenge myself with collage a little bit with light. Mm-hmm. I think every new painting I make, I want to challenge myself, and whether it's now with light or whether it's with detail or with composition. I think that every new series has a new element to it that I try to explore and I try to immerse myself into.
Well, and you've evolved as an artist. I mean, I think this, and it's interesting because the contrast with the last work we're going to look at, but the palette is also so different.
It is so different.
I have to say, when I saw this on our Zoom call in the studio, I was really surprised. And I thought, the work is so full of optimism. I mean, even when your subject is immigration, and even when you're thinking about, you know, the harrowing lives people have lived and survived during the pandemic, there does seem to be optimism in your compositions. And I looked at this and I saw this dark background and such a contrast to the quiet undoing, which is, you know, light and reflection. And so tell me about how you arrived at this, because I know you said this was also very clearly what you knew exactly what this was going to be.
Yeah, like a lot of times, like I think that there's so much process in each work, like it goes from one thing to the other, like sometimes everything changes. I take away figures, I erase the whole thing. And one day I woke up and I had this image in my head and I was like, okay. And then it came out so easy, like it just happened. And in a sense, it's like one of those lucky moments, but at the same time, I was talking to another artist like this week, and he was saying like, oh, he's had these ideas in his head and he hasn't like gone for it. And I was saying to him like, look, maybe they are not gonna work, but you have to do it because sometimes it works. So I think a lot of times making painting is just like this like act of faith that is gonna fail many times, but sometimes it works in a sense. I don't know if it's a successful painting, but I know that is what I had in my head. Mm-hmm. So I think when I made this painting, I had that feeling also of like wanting the world to like get out of the darkness and to like emerge into like a new thing. So it has like that's why I wanted to have a completely dark, like the night behind her, like she's going into a new day, into the
like she's a survivor almost.
Yeah, like there's this sense of hope, but there's also this sense also of cloudiness still. Mm-hmm. Like there's this sense, like I guess in a sense, something I'm feeling right now, which is like there's hope, but there's still not everything, like we can't still see exactly how is it gonna be.
What's really going to happen. There's like this undercurrent of darkness. But
and this undercurrent of,
But she's also, I mean, she's standing, she's forthright, she's looking right at you, she's humbly dressed, although with a lot of patterning that sort of speaks of different places, and then barefoot on this like stone pedestal.
Yeah, she's like ready to go. I don't know if she's ready to fly or she's ready to just like jump. It's like a weird, it has so many different meanings and feelings. But to me, like, I think I wanted to just also create the figure that was a bit like larger than life, and create this sense of this in between like what is going on and what's going to happen.
And the title is the title of the exhibit.
Yeah, the title is Waiting for the Night to Bloom, which was also a title of a work I made in 2013. So in a sense, it's really interesting how if you see that other work, how both have the idea of the night and the idea of, and I use a lot of poetry in my work, but this idea of the night blossoming.
Yeah, which is so a beautiful idea.
Yeah, I think it has, when I think about the night blossoming, I think about getting like coming out of something that was scary or that was not.
Well, and I noticed also, just on a kind of artistic level, rather than using, I mean, such a great contrast to the earliest work where the commercial, the bought paper of something that's already patterned is completely gone now. I mean, you are so adept at collage that every single pattern on this garment you have created with paper. It's extraordinary as well, just artistically how you've evolved. But very bold too, because it's not this obvious group of people, it's this one strong woman.
Cheryl, thank you. That's very sweet. I think it's, like every pattern takes a lot of time, and it's very surprising. Like every pattern has its own like I feel like it has its own rhythm, it has its own everything. So I have challenged myself to create, to stop using patterns and create my own patterns, which is fascinating, which I enjoy deeply. I can get lost in hours and hours of cutting, and then I step back and then I see it taking shape, and it's fun.
It's amazing, and you were so wonderful to create both this piece and the wheat and the orchids in time for us to premiere them in this exhibition.
No, it's such an honor, and everything looks so beautiful, and I'm very grateful to you for all your time and dedication to this exhibition and your positivity.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to have this time together with you in this exhibit, and thank you for your insight and for this beautiful work, Maria.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.